I never imagined one quiet evening could fracture everything I thought was stable. It started with nothing more than dinner and a movie with my stepson, a simple routine in a quiet house. But underneath the calm, something restless stirred. A silence that once comforted me now felt like warning. My name is Claire, and that summer the house felt like a waiting room. Martin, my husband, was always somewhere else. Meetings, flights, promises to call. Our marriage had become a system of messages and reminders. The air between us no longer carried warmth, only distance. Then Adrian came to stay, Martin's son from his first marriage. 23, polite, and a little lost. He had his father's eyes, but none of his coldness. At first, we were polite strangers sharing space. Coffee in the morning, the sound of his music seeping from his room, an occasional laugh over an old movie. But small things began to change. His presence filled the quiet in ways I didn't expect. A comment about my favorite novel, the way he noticed when I wore my hair differently. One night, Martin called to say he'd be gone another week. I poured a glass of wine and sat alone on the couch. Adrian came down the stairs in sweatpants, hair still damp from a shower. He looked relaxed but thoughtful, as if carrying something unsaid. He sat across from me. "You look lonely," he said. I laughed it off, pretending it was harmless. But his eyes didn't move away. There was sincerity there, dangerous sincerity. He noticed everything. The scent of my perfume, the records I played when the house was too still. And then he said it, almost like a confession. "I don't think Martin deserves you." The world stopped for a second. My pulse thundered in my ears. I told him not to say that, but inside something fragile cracked. Loneliness does strange things. It makes you hear what you want to believe. We talked until the clock forgot the hour. About belonging, about emptiness, about the versions of ourselves we'd both lost. His honesty disarmed me. My restraint slipped. When he reached for my hand, I didn't move away. The kiss came quietly, as if the air itself gave permission. It was wrong, every part of it, but in that moment, I didn't want logic. I wanted to feel alive again. Morning came like punishment. The light felt cruel. Adrian barely spoke. I told myself it was a single mistake, that we could return to before. But guilt is never still. It grows roots. And when he looked at me across the breakfast table, the way he always did before that night, I knew it wasn't over. The days after that night felt heavier, like the air had thickened around us. I tried to keep my distance, but the house betrayed me. Too small, too familiar. Every sound reminded me of what I'd done. Every silence reminded me of what I wanted to forget. Adrian moved carefully, but not enough. He'd linger near the kitchen door, waiting for me to look up. He'd find reasons to talk about nothing, his voice low, almost cautious. Then the notes began to appear, folded papers left where I'd find them. "You looked beautiful this morning. I can't stop thinking about you." I tore them apart every time, but it didn't help. The sound of paper ripping only deepened the guilt. He wasn't cruel or impulsive. He was tender in a way that frightened me, because it made the wrong thing feel gentle. One evening, as I folded laundry, he appeared in the doorway. "You've been avoiding me," he said. His tone wasn't accusing, just sad. I didn't answer. He took a few steps forward, close enough for me to smell his cologne. "Don't you feel alive when we talk?" he asked softly. I wanted to say no, but the truth stuck in my throat. I did feel alive, more alive than I had in years. Not in the calm, safe way I once felt with Martin, but in a raw, dangerous way that made my heart remember it could still beat. That night, Martin called. His voice carried through the phone, flat and distant. "Everything okay at home?" he asked. "Yes," I said, staring at the empty space across from me where Adrian had sat the night before. Everything's fine, but everything was already breaking. Sleep wouldn't come. I could hear Adrian walking in the hallway, slow and deliberate. The floor creaked near my door, then went silent. My breath caught. For a long moment, neither of us moved. In the quiet, I imagined what would happen if he opened the door. I also imagined what would happen if he didn't. Both thoughts terrified me. The next morning, he was in the kitchen, making coffee like nothing had changed. "You can hate me if you want," he said quietly, "but don't pretend it meant nothing." didn't answer. I couldn't, because pretending it meant nothing was the only thing holding me together. He smiled sadly and turned away, but I could feel the space between us pulling tight again, a gravity neither of us could undo. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in years. I didn't write his name. I didn't write mine. Just one sentence that felt truer than anything. Some sins don't burn. They bloom. And somewhere down the hall, I could hear Adrian's footsteps again, moving closer. The next morning arrived dressed in silence. I went about the day like a ghost rehearsing her old life, washing dishes, straightening pillows, pretending the world hadn't shifted. But inside, everything had changed. Every movement carried memory. Every shadow whispered his name. Adrian avoided me that day. Or maybe I avoided him. I'm not sure who was protecting whom anymore. By evening, the weight of what lingered between us had turned the house into a confession booth. I found him outside, sitting on the back steps staring at the fading sky. He didn't look up when I joined him. "You ever wish you could undo a moment?" he asked. "All the time," I said. He nodded, then looked at me, eyes tired but steady. "I don't regret it," he whispered. "Not a second. I wanted to say I did, that it was wrong, that love built on guilt can't survive. But my mouth betrayed me. Neither do I said, almost too softly to hear. We didn't touch. We didn't need to. The silence between us was more intimate than any embrace, and that's when I realized the cruelty of desire. It doesn't end with the act. It lives on, demanding space inside the conscience. When Martin returned 2 days later, he brought the smell of hotel soap and distance. He kissed my cheek out of habit and talked about meetings I didn't care to understand. Adrian greeted him politely, controlled, as if nothing had ever happened. Watching them together was unbearable. The man I'd once loved, and the boy who reminded me what it felt like to be wanted. That night, Martin fell asleep beside me. His breathing was slow, steady, unbothered. I stared at the ceiling, haunted by the thought that he would never know what I'd done, and that somehow felt worse than if he did. Secrets rot slowly, from the inside out. Over the next weeks, Adrian grew quieter. One morning, he told me he'd been accepted to a job in another city. He said he'd be leaving by the end of the week. Relief and sorrow collided in me like two waves breaking against each other. The day he left, he hugged me briefly, almost formally. "You'll forget me?" he said. "No," I replied, "but I'll learn to live with it." He smiled, eyes bright with something I couldn't name, and then he was gone. The door closed, and the silence that followed was different now, heavier, but real. Sometimes at night, I catch myself listening for his footsteps again, expecting that soft creak in the hallway. But it never comes. What remains is the echo of a choice I can't undo. If you've ever loved someone you shouldn't have, you'll understand. Desire doesn't vanish. It hides beneath the ordinary, waiting for the smallest spark to wake it again. If this story touched you, remember to subscribe. Some truths don't destroy us. They remind us we were once alive enough to sin.